It was October '45, and I'd only started there on August 23rd. And CBS wanted to know if we could originate the dedication of Kentucky Dam. President Truman was going to come to Kentucky on October the 12th, I think it was. So we did the broadcast. WSM Nashville originated it for NBC, and Mutual, WLW Cincinnati was both an NBC and a Mutual affiliate.
Mm-hmm.
So WLW Cincinnati did the Mutual broadcast. And ABC, and I've forgotten what they did, maybe, I don't think they even originated it. Well, 48 came along, and by that time I had done quite a number of cut-ins, and I loved it, of course, because I was making $50 a week when I started there, and CBS paid me $50 for every cut-in.
Mm-hmm.
So a week with a cut-in was $100.
Doubled your salary, right?
Yeah, double my pay. And you know, from an old country boy from Hardin, I just thought I was the richest man in the United States.
Did you ever meet Ed Murrow?
Oh yeah, I met him. In '48, we did the broadcast from the Barclay home. I was on duty 27 hours, although of course it wasn't on the air continuously. We had a hotline telephone, and Murrow would call up every once in a while, and he'd say, "Well, Ray, I'm ready for another cut-in. What can you give me on Barclay?" Or we'd talk about if anything I could do. And I won an award that night for the best cut-in. And the cut-in was that along about 10 o'clock, with the count going in favor of Dewey and Warren, and everybody thinking that Truman and Barclay had lost, his daughters came in, Miss Truitt particularly, and said, "Dad, you've got to go to bed. It's been a long, hard campaign. You've engaged in this prop stop thing. You've covered 36 states, and you're worn to a frazzle, and you just must go to bed and get some sleep." So he agreed rather docilely and put on his pajamas and went back to the bedroom. No one thought much more about it. Along about 3 a.m. the next morning, the count was turning the other direction. And so Murrow called me and said, "Can you get anything out of Barclay?" And I said, "Well, I'll see." So I tiptoed back. I told him he'd gone to bed, that he might be asleep. Probably was. And when I stuck my head in the bedroom door, he said, "Come on in, Ray. I haven't been asleep any of the time." He said, "I've got a radio under the covers."
He'd been listening.
He said, "I've been listening." And I said, "Then you know that you're now the vice president-elect." And he said, "Well, yes, I'm aware of it." So he got up and ordered ham and eggs for all the radio people there. And I got my story. And Murrow put me on for 2 minutes and 8 seconds, I believe, to tell this little episode. Now, Barclay himself refused to be interviewed at that point. He said, "I don't think it would be fitting and proper for me to speak before President Truman does." And so he didn't actually go on the air at that point. But I described this little episode, and Murrow gave me the award as the best human interest story of the night.
Well, that must have been quite an exciting thing, because you'd been at the station, what, just 3 years?
Yeah,
out of Murray,
right.
A graduate of Murray for 4 years, maybe?
Well, I had finished the class 43.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was still not quite dry behind the ears, and I'd had all these wonderful experiences.
Playing in the big time.
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
Well, over the years, I continued to do a number of things. I did a Face the Nation one time with John Sherman Cooper. It was then on radio, not TV as it is now. Well, I think maybe they still run it on radio and TV both. They take the soundtrack and repeat it as a radio show.
Did that originate in Paducah at
Yeah,
the station
at the
there?
WPAD studios.
Well, I would like to back up before you started working at PAD, because one of the things that fascinates me is the effects of change in our social structure that communications has brought about. And you were talking about being a country boy from Hardin. When did you first encounter radio or become interested in this new technology of communications?
Well, the only station, of course, until about 1947 was WPAD. So everybody in this country listened to it. I don't know why, but I had been from the very first grade on, we called it the primer then, a little one-room country school in which Carrie Redden was the teacher. I always was in the Christmas program and in all the plays and recited poems and
You liked being up in front of the people.
I liked to be in front of people. I guess I was just a ham. That's all you could
You
make
need
out
to
of
have a little of that,
Yeah.
I think. I think it's sort of a prerequisite.
You know, many of the kids were bashful, and Miss Redden would say, well, who would do that? And I always volunteered. And so then I got in my mind in some way that I'd love to be a radio announcer. And I'd go around like Henry Clay, you know. He said he used to practice on the stumps and speak to the pigs. And Barclay told those same kinds of tales, too. Well, I did. I would listen to a commercial on WPAD, and then I'd memorize the commercial, and I'd go around reciting it.
Talking like they talked on the radio.
Yeah, trying to be a radio announcer, quote. So I went to Murray then. I was on the debate team. We happened to win the first region tournament in 1940, my senior year. We had Winston Starks was another member of the debate team, and Phil Youngblood and Mildred Dunn and Alta Brown. I guess those were the team members. Well, Starks and I did most of the debating in the state tournament. We finished third. We lost in the semifinals to Fort Thomas Highlands High School of Fort Thomas. And they were state champions, but I won the award as the best speaker in Kentucky, although we didn't win the championship. But I was wanting to go to college, but of course we didn't have much money. My dad was a sharecropper, as I've said, and we rented the old farm there from Mr. Booker. But the debate coach, in the finals at Murray, in the semifinals, we met Paducah Tillman, and they had a tremendous team. But we won on a 3-0 decision, and the judges were Dr. Forrest Pogue, who's now at the Smithsonian, Pogue Library named for him, and Dr. C.S. Lowry, the famous curmudgeon who is still living in Murray, lives out at the nursing home, and Dr. LaFollette, who was the debate coach at Murray. So he came to see me, and he said, "Say, I'd like for you to debate for Murray State." And I said, well, I surely would love to, but now I've been saving money for 4 years to try to go to college, and I can go during the fall term because I've saved $25, and that's what it costs to register. I'll hitchhike from home, and I'll take my lunch in a brown paper bag, and I'll make it for one term, but if I go any longer than that, I'm going to have a job. So he said, okay, I'll give you a scholarship. Now, scholarships in those days were were work scholarships, even for the basketball team. Now, Joe Falks and I were in the same class, and I mention him because he made the all-time All-Pro NBA All-Star team, and he was from Birmingham, Kentucky, and in the class of 40, and we both started to Murray at the same time. And he worked. His job was to sweep out Wilson Hall with a broom. Well, they put me on the campus detail. I had to haul all the trash out of the dining room and rake the leaves and mow the yard. We didn't have a gasoline mower on the Murray State campus.
Hand mower.
Hand mower. When you said push mower, you meant push. There was real type blades, you know. So I worked at that, and then the second year they put me in the library, and then I finished on top of the world, sort of.
Was the original basic campus of Murray sort of that quadrangle square that still exists with the library?
That's right. That was it.
That was it. At that time.
At that time.
Was it a teacher's college? Or
Murray State Teachers College was the official name, and it stayed that way till 1946.
Mm-hmm. So you graduated to become a teacher? You didn't go to university or go to college to
well,
major in radio and
no,
communications?
We didn't.
Didn't have such a thing.
We didn't have such a thing. Dr. LaFollette was the only speech teacher, and according to the rules of the Accreditation Association, then you could only offer a minor if you had one teacher. And Dr. Horton was the journalism teacher. Well, I minored in journalism and minored in speech, and I don't know, I was gung-ho, I guess. I got a third minor in Spanish and majored in history. So,
well, did you know at that time when you got close to graduating that you were going to go into radio, or what did you do as soon as you got out of Murray?
Well, as soon as I got out,
a living for yourself beyond mowing yards.
I became old enough that I had to register for the draft February the 16th, 1942. And World War II was going on. And I realized then that I'd soon be drafted. The Navy had a program in which if you would sign up, they would induct you, swear you in, and they didn't pay you anything, but they put you in a program called V7, and they put you on inactive duty till you got your degree. Then they promised they'd send you to midshipman school. So I finished in the summer of '43, went to midshipman school at the University of Notre Dame in the fall of '43. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess depending on how you look at it, I injured a knee in a training accident and tore the ligaments in that left knee, and so they just discharged me. So I came back to West Kentucky, to Hardin, went up to Murray, and I was sitting there in the office of Marvin Rather, who was then about everything on the campus. He had a dozen jobs. Among them was placement service. Mm-hmm. And he was alumni secretary and director of extension and you name it. So the fellow on the other end of the phone said, I'm looking for a teacher. And Mr. Rath said, well, I've got one sitting here in the office. I said, what kind of teacher do you want? Well, he said, I know there's no teacher on earth like I'd like to have. He said, I'd like to have somebody who could teach an American history class, who could teach a section of Spanish, and who could teach speech, coach debate in the 11 individual events, and also be a journalist and put out the school newspaper. That's what I'd really like. Rather says, that's Mofield. Said he's got every one of those. And the guy almost fell out of his chair. His name was Winkler. It was at Vienna, Illinois. And so I thought I'd gone to the biggest high school in the world. We had 12 teachers.
Much bigger than Hardin.
Well, Hardin had 3.
So this was?
So they were
bigger.
Yeah, it was a huge thing. So I put out the school newspaper. You talk about working. And when I got there, they'd promised me $140 a month, I believe it was. And he said, if you could drive the school bus, and we just had a bus driver drafted last week, and see, this was 1944, January 1944. He said, if you could drive a school bus, well, I'll give you $20 more, make you $160 a month. He said, I've got a place for you to stay out at the end of the line with Ernest Malhagen. And so I said, okay, I'll take it. Well, since the teachers in Kentucky were then making $75 a month in Marshall County, again, I thought I was the richest man in the world. Well, that summer, I worked on Kentucky Dam. They were building that, and I became a time checker. I still had my dream of broadcasting. The next fall, NBC offered or staged a contest and said they were going to pick 25 promising young radio announcers to go to school at Northwestern University. Well, Northwestern was my dream. Everybody in the speech field worshiped Northwestern because Mr. Swift, the meat packer, had been a loyal Methodist and had endowed the School of Speech there in 1914. So it was the first modern speech school in the world, and they taught the first radio show in 1926, a radio class. So I said, well, I believe I'll enter that contest, and you had to write various
You
and
hadn't
sundry
worked
things.
at PSD, you'd
No.
been a school teacher, and that's
Just
no
been a-
real experience in radio,
I had no broadcast experience whatever.
other than speaking to the pigs. And
The only
stuff.
time I had ever seen, I had seen WPAD because my aunt and uncle were in one of these, what they call a gospel quartet. And they'd gone and had sung on WPAD one Sunday morning, and I went with them and saw it. Taylor Building, oh, I thought that's the prettiest station on earth. Had glass front, chairs out where the audience could watch, and it's seated.
They'd have audiences for the radio show.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There were about 40 seats around there. And they drew a big crowd. People had just come and just watched the performers in
So
the
that
studio.
just whet your appetite for more.
Oh, that made me want to be a radio announcer more than ever. Well, anyway, I entered. I had the thing recorded, a little recording studio there in Paducah, and sent it to Northwestern and to NBC, and I was one of the 25 winners.
Nationwide?
Nationwide contest. We had about 3,000 applicants, so I understood. And why they ever picked me, I have no idea. But one of the fellows, the man that taught announcing, was a fellow named Lou Rowan, and he was the Skelly Oil announcer and a chief announcer at WMAQ, a 50,000-watt NBC station in Chicago. They originated a lot of things there then. So I took announcing under Lou Rowan, and the DJ work was under a fellow, the morning man, by the way, you've later heard of, I imagine. His name was Dave Garraway. And, of course, we didn't know anything about television then. There was only one TV station in Chicago. And I went over there and trained a little bit, and we appeared on a program or two on Channel 4, WBKB. It was owned by the movie people in Chicago, Balaban Cats, and that's what the call letter stood for. And they were, Barney Balaban had about 20% of the stock in Paramount Pictures. So he was getting into TV thinking someday it would help the movies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the end, they didn't promise us anything. I took news at Northwestern. I registered as a graduate student and completed 14 hours that summer. But at the end of it, they said, we're going to pick about 6 or 7 people that we'll recommend for jobs somewhere. So, at the end, they selected me as one of the announcing winners, and I was offered $50 a week to go to WTMA in Charleston, South Carolina, which was the NBC station there. 1,000 watts. I thought, boy, that's a whopper. But when I came home, I had the telegram in my pocket, and I was so happy. But Mother and Dad didn't much want me to leave this area. They said, a long way to Charleston, South Carolina. Why don't you go to Paducah? Well, I had tried to get on at the newspaper, and I hadn't thought before of the radio station, and I went by to see Mr. Lackey, and he said, well, I do need a person. Says, get in there and read. And he went back in the wire and says, I want to see you read some of these Southwest Pacific names. This was August of 45. Remember, we just dropped the atomic bomb, and they were getting ready for the surrender on the battleship Missouri, September of 45. And so I read all those things about Guadalcanal and Okinawa, and he thought it was good. He said, well, you read real well. He says, what do you want? I said, $50 a week. And he said, well, I never paid anybody that much. He said, I had Charlie Humphreys here, paid him $35, most I ever paid an announcer. And I said, well, I showed him the telegram. I said, I've got a job. He said, well, you're kind of a cocky rascal, but said, I like you. He said, I'll tell you what, you work for me 2 weeks for $35 a week, and if you're half as good as you think you are, I'll give you 50. I said, that's a deal. So I went to work. 2 weeks later, I said, well, what, do I leave or stay? He said, oh, stay on. He says, I'll give you $50 a week. Well,
so
I
you started
stayed
out just as announcer. That was your original title.
Yeah, original title. And then he raised my pay to $50 and gave me a title, chief announcer. Whatever that meant, I don't know.
After 2 weeks.
I don't know what it meant, but it just meant you did everything. You had a broom, you swept out in the morning, carried out the waste paper. I did football, basketball, news, sales.
Would you also run the board? And
oh, yeah, sure. I ran a board shift.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, my first few weeks there, I opened up on Sunday morning and worked till 1 o'clock. And then the rest of the week, we weren't off any day. We worked 7 days a week then. So Monday through Saturday, I went to work at about 2 in the afternoon and worked till sign-off at 11 p.m. So
Tuesday through Saturday?
Yeah. Well, no,
Monday through Saturday, 6 days.
We worked 7 days a week. Sunday morning I opened up, and then the other 6 days I signed off.
That kept you busy,
yeah,
I guess.
So I didn't get into too much trouble because...
Well, another thing I wanted to ask you about is how you began or how you got involved with the Easter Seal Society. I understood that you were instrumental in that first fundraising effort to build the Easter Seal Center, which has continued to become the Channel 6 telethon these days. But how did that begin? How did it start?
Well, the Lions Club was interested in that kind of thing, and Pruitt Lackey, the boss's brother, was a member of the Lions Club, and so he had said to me and to another fellow there who was then assistant manager, a man named Gene Peake, young man, who died real young though. In fact, I think he died about 4 years after I went there, and I took his job. But he said, I wish we could get maybe a radio auction started. And there was a fellow named Abe Thompson who worked for KU. He's now retired and lives in Fulton, Kentucky. I see him every once in a while. And 3 or 4 more of the Lions Club members, a guy named Raw McNeil that sold over at Rhodes Burford, and I don't remember now just who all of them were. But we went around and we got time, and Pierce said, okay, I'll give you all the time. He says, give them all the time you want to. By the way, I'd ask him what I could do. And he said, Ray, you can do anything you want to as long as it doesn't cost anything. And laughed real big. He always said that as long as I worked there. So we set up, and I canceled out everything we had from the network from Monday through Saturday night. And the merchants gave merchandise, and we cleared $10,000 that first year. Now that was in the fall of '45.
There really wasn't a center as such.
There was no center. And so we took that money and began the center. And then the next year in '46, the Paducah Sun, Democrat it was then, had built an AM station on 800 kilocycles, a daytimer. They didn't help us that year, so we had it in our studios. And then in '47, they came on with their FM. So we moved the auction to the lobby of the Paducah Bank, and both stations aired it.
Downtown?
Downtown. They were, let's see, Broadway at 6. Although they weren't over on that corner where they moved from the last time. They were on the opposite side along about where Rothrock's restaurant was at a later period, not too far from St. Francis de Sales and the Columbia Theater. It was in between there. That was the Paducah Bank when it first began. And so the two radio stations carried that on then until the TV station came on in '57. When they came on in '57, of course we had the Easter Seal Center all built and everything running smoothly by that time, and we were taking in $25,000 a year or so. But of course now they go to $500,000.
Don't you get a feeling of satisfaction of having been involved in inauguration,
I really do. I was one of the people that helped run the drive to build Baptist Hospital. You know, it was a general fund drive. I know the Baptist churches paid a good part of it, but the general public made many, many contributions for that. And all of those things obviously are a source of satisfaction.